Hey friends! Welcome to Spirit Club, a podcast and community that is all about doing the inner work to live an aligned and, dare I say, happy life. I'm your host, spiritual guide and intuitive, Angell Kelly, and I'm here to share my teachings along with messages passed on to me from higher consciousness. I've also got incredible guests in store to help you go down all those spiritual rabbit holes. So let's go! Welcome to the club! Hi friends! Today we are going to talk about trusting the universe. And I'm going to use the words God and the universe interchangeably in this discussion. For me, it's really about trusting God, but I know that word can be a bit triggering. I know for me it once was. So just know if I say God and that makes you uncomfortable, you can use the word universe, whatever word, spirit, that resonates most with you for this conversation. And this topic about trusting the universe has been requested a lot by this community, which tells me that you have a hard time with it. So I hope that I can help out. And I can remember a time where I had a hard time with it. Trust me. There was a time where trust was really difficult for me. And therefore, I tried to control everything in my surrounding in order to feel safe. But I've come a long way from that, and now I live very much in trust. So I hope that I can really help you in your development around trust. So, like we always do here on Spirit Club, let's break it down. I want to start with talking about why trusting God or the universe is so hard. So this all comes down to control. Okay, you're going to see in this discussion that trust and releasing control they go hand in hand. So why is trusting the universe so hard? It's about control. If we go back to our caveman days, the more that we could control, the better our survival. The unknown, which we can't control, leads to danger. We're talking about caveman days here. So we learned that control equals survival, which is a good thing. And that's really stuck with us. But we no longer live in these like life or death scenarios every day, right? So we are perceiving it as such, right? So every time something is out of our control, our nervous system is almost perceiving as though we might die, or as though it's a threat against our survival, but it really isn't. It's just a change in our jobs or a change in our relationships or a change in where we're going to live. That's not actually truly life or death, but we perceive it as such, okay? And so those changes, we struggle with trusting the universe, trusting our path, trusting God's will, because we want to control in order to survive. Does that make sense? So this is really about controlling. In order to trust, we have to release that control, and therefore we have to release exactly how things are going to turn out. Okay. So trusting God, trusting the universe is really asking us to do the opposite. It's asking us to surrender control to something else, surrendering this control to the universe, to God. That's hard. That's scary, right? Because if we associate that control with our survival, then we're putting our survival in the hands of something else. And that is why it's so hard. Okay. Okay. So now let's talk about what you really want, which is how do I trust God or the universe more? And as you can tell by the nature of this question, how do I trust God more? How do I trust the universe more? I can't really teach you that, right? Like trust is a felt experience. that you can't really cerebrally learn. However, I can offer you some shifts in perspective and some exercises that will help you to grow in your trust. So that's what I hope to do here. So I have 6 tips to gain trust in the universe and God. So tip number 1 is to accept that you don't know it all. So there are infinite possibilities of how you can get from point A to point B, let's say, on your path. And us humans, we know one little narrow slice, one way that we can get from point A to point B. And that one way we know is carved by experiences we've had, our programming, and what we've been exposed to so far in life. But there are so many possibilities, and God knows all possibilities. God can see from a much higher perspective and all the best ways for you to get from point A to point B. And in fact, I don't really want to say point A to point B, but rather for you to be living your highest, most aligned path, your highest, most greatest good. God knows all the possibilities. We know some narrow possibilities. Okay, so can you trust that there's something you haven't thought of? Can you have the humility to accept that you don't know it all? You don't know maybe what's best for you? Can we have that humility? So you can imagine it like this. Imagine you've got a fridge and you've got a couple ingredients in it. You've got some eggs, some veggies, milk, onions. And when you think about okay, what can I make for myself for dinner? You can maybe think of 1 or 2 options with those ingredients. You're I can make an omelet. Okay, but if you were to ask a chef who has has so many more ideas about how to use these ingredients, the chef, he or she may offer you 10 different things you can make with those ingredients. Okay, so imagine it this way. God is the chef of all things and knows all the different ways, all the different combinations to get you to your happiest, highest, and greatest good. So when you are playing with the energy of trust, try to lean into that. Try to lean into, I do not know all possibilities. I do not know, but God knows all. So can I trust? And something that might help you with this one is to think of a time, think back to a time when something really random but really great came into your life. Like a person or a job or a thing or an item, something like that you would have never thought of. Try to remember a time where something that you would have never thought of came into your life, but it was so great. That is an example of God, the universe working its magic, and you not, because you wouldn't have come up with that possibility, right? Okay. That is an example of what happens when you lean into trust. Okay, second tip to work on growing trust. I want you to grab a journal. Maybe you do this after the episode. You're going to grab a journal, pen and paper, whatever, and you're going to make 2 columns. One will be trust and one will be control. In the trust column, I want you to think back to times in your life where you've leaned into trust and what happened on the other side of that trust. And you're going to put that into the trust column. If you're having trouble with that prompt, another thing you could try is think of the greatest, most aligned things that have come into your life. And then think of what you were doing before it came into your life. And chances are those really aligned things, moments, experiences, people, those types of things, they often came on the backside of you releasing control and trusting. I'm willing to bet. Okay, so write those into your trust column. And then in your control column, you're going to think about outcomes that you've really controlled, things that you've made happen. Okay, and you're just going to list those outcomes and then do some reflection about the outcomes that came on the other side of control versus the outcomes that came on the other side of trust. And chances are you're going to see that the ones that you controlled, they weren't exactly it. They weren't it. And the ones that you leaned into trust, those were like magical. So for me, when I think of an outcome that I really tried to control, it was becoming a geologist. So I can remember when I was like, I went to McGill University in Montreal, and when I was trying to transfer into McGill, because I returned to school a little bit later, it was a nightmare. And I was getting constant resistance and pushback. And, university was like painful and a struggle for me. And then trying to get into my professional order was very, very challenging. And, so I was receiving all these signs from the universe to not push forward, and I did, and I forced it, and I pushed through. So what do I see on the other side of control? Well, I see a career that's not truly aligned. I know that now. And that I had a lot of lessons and challenges around, a lot. Then when I look at things that came on the other side of trust, I see my intuitive gifts. I would never have controlled that outcome. I'd never thought about that in my life. But I was really playing in the energy of surrender and releasing control and trust. And when I did that, intuition came online. A lot of abundance, money flowed into my life, and my relationship with Shane, who I'm now engaged to. So lots of magic. So I hope that by doing this exercise, you receive some examples from your own life. And this is important because you are going to lean on these examples whenever you're having a moment where it's difficult for you to trust, because you will have those for the rest of your life. You will. You will have more and more, the more you lean into trust, you will have more examples of great things that happen. And then as you move forward in time and you are struggling leaning into trust with something even bigger and more challenging to trust around, you will rely on these examples. So important to have them in your toolbox. Okay, so that was second tip on how to grow in your trust of the universe. Third tip is going to build trust like it's a muscle. So I want to be clear that I want you to understand that when I say build trust, I don't mean that God has to gain your trust. That's not what I mean. But rather what you're doing is in practicing releasing control in small ways, you are teaching yourself to turn down fear and turn up trust. It's really about, how do I say this better? In practicing releasing control, you're releasing that survival part of your brain in small ways and then in bigger ways, much like building a muscle. Okay? So rather than starting with asking yourself to trust the universe around something huge, something that impacts your survival in your mind, like, let's say, your job, your livelihood, rather than starting there, something with big that's really scary, start with something small. And what is an example of something small? I can't really give you one because what is something small to me may be something large to you. You know what I mean? So I could say, start with something small like around your body or food or something like that. But to you, releasing control around what you eat might feel like very scary. So rather than giving you an example, I'm going to say, ask yourself, what is something that I'm trying to control right now that I could practice trust on? So just look around your life. What's something that I'm trying to control that if I take this risk and trust God, the universe around this, if it doesn't go my way, if it goes the worst way possible, I'll be okay. That's an example of something small. Okay. So something small is if I take the risk, and I'm using air quotes because it is not a risk, but it's going to feel like a risk to you. If I take the risk to lean into trust in this one small part of my life and it goes worst case scenario, my biggest fear happens, I'll be okay. This is a good place to start practicing. Okay. So you practice there. And then every time you feel yourself starting to exert control on that little part of your life, you're going to, oh, I'm going to surrender deeper. And then you watch what happens. And on the other side of trust, you watch what happens. And I'm willing to bet it's going to be something that is more in alignment. And let me be clear, when I say more in alignment, I don't mean the outcome that you want. That's important. It's going to be more in alignment. And then it's important that you record this because, like the previous tip I gave you on making note of examples, it's important to record what happens so that you are building it like a muscle. Recording what happens and remembering it and reflecting back to it is kind of like lifting weights. And now you'll be able to lift bigger weights. So that's an important part of building trust like a muscle. Okay, so give that a whirl. Okay, fourth tip on how to work on your trust with God and the universe is to work on your nervous system. So, have you ever noticed how much easier it is to lean into trust when you aren't stressed out and when you're not in like fight or flight mode? If you are like not sleeping, super stressed out with life, work, drinking a lot, caffeinating a lot, eating a lot of sugary things, there is no way that you're going to be able to play and trust. It's very difficult. It's really like making it much more challenging for you because your body, your nervous system is already in fear. It's already in fear. And then you're asking it to lean into trust. You don't need to do like advanced mode trust, okay? So better way to work on it is to prepare your nervous system to be in its safest position and from there lean into trust. So for me right now, I'm doing a big scary thing, which I will share with you guys sometime in the near future. And I can feel that I need to treat my body really well. So I ask my body, my nervous system, what do you need in order to feel safe? Because it's just like waking up unsafe because I'm doing a scary thing. So what does it need? It needs a really good sleep. It needs some routine. It needs meditation. It needs a good workout every day. It needs vegetables. It needs me to drink less coffee, drink less alcohol, all those sorts of things. So I know doing all that will create the safest environment for me to trust. I'm sure that one's pretty, what's the word? Intuitive for you guys. Okay, tip number 5. Very important one, and you're probably not going to like it. And it is to let go of the outcome. So this one's a little bit similar to the first tip I gave you, accepting that you don't know it all. But it's worth repeating and looking at it from this angle. This angle is very important. A lot of the time people will say to me, how do I trust that my business will be a success? How do I trust that this relationship's going to work out? And they think that they're asking me how to trust God, how to trust the universe, but they're not. They're asking for that specific outcome. How do I trust that this specific outcome that I want is going to work out? And I'm sorry to say this, friends, but trusting the universe, that is not trusting the universe. That's controlling. That's controlling masked as trust. I'm sorry, and I know it's hard to hear, but trusting the universe is letting go of your agenda and your outcome. And trusting that God has your highest and greatest good in mind. And that's the outcome that will come to be if you lean into trust. So I know this is really hard. I know. But this is truly what trust means. So if you take nothing from this episode, take this, that in order to really trust God and the universe, you must release the outcome that you want. Okay? Okay, that's all I'll say about that. Okay, final note, tip around developing trust is to create a relationship with God. So when we talk about trust, we are really talking about something that happens in relationship, right? I don't trust that chair over there. I don't trust these inanimate objects. No, when we talk about trust, we're generally talking about people. We're talking about, do I trust this person or myself? We're talking about something that happens in relationship. And perhaps part of the reason that you're struggling with trust is because you don't have a relationship to God. You don't have a relationship. And I'm purposely using the word God here because for me, it was more natural to develop a relationship to God than the universe, but to each their own. So how do you develop a relationship with God? The same way you develop a relationship with anyone. Talk to God. Spend time with God. This is how you develop a relationship. And the thing is that once you develop a relationship to God and you feel the love that God has for you, trust will be so much easier. Do you see how that's a natural outcome? When I know that I'm loved, I can trust that whatever God has in store for me is far greater than what I can think of and is coming for me. All I have to do is let go, lean in, hand over my plan to God. So that is my final tip for you, is to have a relationship, because I think a lot of the time, and because there's so much trauma and there's been so much breakdown about our relationship with God, a lot of the time, and part of the reason you're more comfortable using the word universe is because then it's outside of you. It's like there's more separation between you and God. But the more of a relationship you have, the more trust you will have. Okay, so as you can see from this episode, that trusting God or the universe is actually more about surrendering control. They really go hand in hand. And I can tell you from my experience of developing the skill of surrendering control and then at the same time developing my relationship with God, the payoff is huge. Huge. It's 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times more magical than control. And I know I really lived into control. Please trust me when I say this. I controlled every outcome. I feel like I was a master at it. I really pushed my agenda far beyond even when my intuition was screaming at me to stop. And what has come on the other side of releasing control, which was truly scary, and I had to lean into that fear and allow it to dissolve. But what came on the other side of it, I would never have imagined for myself. And you've heard me say this 1,000 times. So I leave you with this prayer. If you want to close your eyes, put your hands on your heart. And when you feel fear creeping in and you don't know how to trust, I leave you with this prayer. I surrender my will into the hands of God and trust that on the other side of the unknown is an outcome far greater than I can currently comprehend. That's it. I'll leave you with that, friends, and I wish you all the trust that